Just a few things for today's session. You will be muted during the program, but if you have any questions for the presenter, you can put those in the chat and we'll get to those at the end of the presentation. Also, you notice you had to accept an agreement because we are recording this session. So if you would not like to appear, you can go ahead and turn off your camera and you will not appear on the video. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Danielle with the Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability. And she's going to tell you a little bit about what they do and also introduce our speaker for today. Thank you so much, Danielle.
Thanks, Vanessa, and welcome everyone to Earth Day Every Day. We have a very engaging program and speaker for you today, so be prepared to take notes. The City of Dallas Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability is very proud of our partnership with the Dallas Public Library, and that partnership is not quite a year old. We started the Earth Day Every Day series as a salute on the 50th anniversary of Earth Day last year, and we still celebrate daily thanks to our partners at the Dallas Public Library, specifically Vanessa and Jordan. They've been wonderful. Next week, we have 3 more great programs that I know you'll be interested in. Grow With Us. Our Grow With Us series will be featuring roots and fruits, and you'll learn to select, plant, and care for fruit trees. We also have 2 amazing Earth Day celebratory sessions. Again, as we're entering the 51st year of Earth Day, we will have a chance to learn about the City of Dallas's Climate Action Plan. And a year ago, the Dallas City Council unanimously approved the city's comprehensive environmental climate action plan. And so we're excited to share with you the actions that have taken place in the last year and to share with you what we are planning to do next. So stay tuned for our climate coordinator who will be taking you through that information session. And of course, Earth Kids is going to be with Bonton Farms, and that's also in partnership with the Dallas Public Library. You can go to librarymarket.com to register your child for that. And Bonton Farmers will be teaching, sharing their chickens and teaching children of all ages just how sustainable we can all be. And finally, we're very excited about another event that is happening tomorrow. The city will be hosting the 4th annual North Texas Climate Change Symposium. And the symposium centers around the business case for climate action and activities. And that's happening from 9 to noon as part of the city's Earth Day celebrations for this year. The program again focuses on how businesses of all sizes, no matter how large or how small they are, how they can pivot their operations to mitigate their impact and adapt to climate change. And we have an exciting panel of roster of speakers, including the president and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas and corporations like Toyota, Good Co-working, and Ericsson, who've already made the commitment in leading the way. So you can register for that climate change symposium by going to dallasclimateaction.com, or you can watch it live on the City of Dallas's website, dallascityhall.com, or on your city cable provider. But today you've tuned in because you, like I, are thrilled to learn what's going on at one of the most beautiful places in Dallas, Texas Discovery Gardens. Joining us today is Carrie Harrison. Carrie is the botanical director at Texas Discovery Gardens, where she supervises the grounds and greenhouse staff, outdoor volunteers, and she also fills in wherever possible at one of the most beautiful places in Dallas, the 7.5-acre Botanic Garden. Excuse me. I've got my window up, so the allergies are coming in. I hope that's not the case where Carrie is right now, but at the Historic Fair Park. So I'm going to stop talking so I can get a sip of water and take something for these allergies. Carrie, please share.
Thank you, Danielle. Thanks very much. And I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for the introduction and for the opportunity to share the gardens with everyone. I'm going to share my screen and start my timer. So we'll get started here in just a couple of seconds. You're getting a little preview there. All right, we should be all set. And let me start my clock so I don't go on too long. All right, so whenever I was first asked to give this presentation, we were talking a little bit about resilience. And of course, Earth Day Every Day, the presentation series, and talking about what are great water-wise plants, drought resistant and heat resistant plants. And then in February, of course, we had the freeze, and so it wasn't just drought and drought tolerant plants, but also cold tolerant plants. So you can see this image was taken outside of our gates late in the summer last year. And I have a slide further down that doesn't look quite the same. You can see there have been some big changes. So we'll get started here pretty soon. Just a little outline. I'll talk a little bit about our history and vision here at Texas Discovery Gardens. It's one of the oldest botanic gardens in the state, and a little bit about our gardening philosophy, and then the 3 gardens that have some of the most resilient plants in them: the Benny Simpson collection, our butterfly habitat, and then of course Conservation Canyon, which has some technical parts to it as well. And then if we have time, I'll talk a little bit about our challenges and successes over the past year. So a little bit about me. Most of us still working at Discovery Gardens have several different roles. So I'm also gardens manager and greenhouse manager. I finished a master's in landscape architecture a few years ago, and that was UT Arlington. You can see a fall image of UT Arlington's campus right there. Went to University of Maine from Texas and finished that botany degree quite a few years ago. And then a long time ago, I studied interior design at UT Austin. And I really enjoy traveling, as you might be able to tell, and also, of course, love learning about plants. So if you don't know about Texas Discovery Gardens and where we are located in Fair Park. And so Fair Park has been around for a long time. The city acquired Fair Park in 1904. And a lot of people associate Fair Park with the state fair. True, state fair is held there, but there's also a lot of events held there throughout the year. And we'll be returning, I'm sure, this next year. This building where our offices are housed was built in 1936, and the organization was chartered as Dallas Garden Center back in the early 40s. And then in the late 50s, the main hall, if you've been to our facility, it's what we call the Grand Hall now, and it looks out south over the gardens. It was added as an add-on onto that original building. And then just a really brief history of some of our gardens. This is where our building is located. These gardens that are closest to the buildings were added in the 60s and 70s, and most of those were designed by Joe Lampert's landscape architectural firm. In 1988, our Grand Allée was added, and so that stretches out here. We have Savannah hollies that line that path to the fountains at the end. In 2000, our name changed to reflect a little bit of change in philosophy to Texas Discovery Gardens. And then another big event was the opening of our butterfly house, which the full name is the Rosine Smith Salmons Butterfly House and Insectarium. So we just shortened that to Butterfly House. And that's the area that a lot of people are familiar with that contains the tropical butterflies. And so that is open again, and we're happy to have those butterflies flying. And we try to focus as much as we can on education. I saw that Scout had signed on, so I know she's watching. She's our new education director, Scout Woodward, and so she's heading up the redevelopment of our educational program. And of course, we want everyone to be able to copy some of what we do at home. And we have an older vision that I think really describes what we want to do, to think about how we can share what we do here with everyone that has a little bit of soil and can plant something to restore, conserve, and preserve, and to do that through butterflies, bugs, and botany. So thinking about what a garden can be, everybody has a different idea of what they want their garden to be and what other people should have their gardens looking like. But we tried to move a little bit from garden as just a showplace to garden as a showplace and a habitat. And why would we do that? Well, it's no secret that a lot of birds are going extinct, or at least very, their populations are critical levels. And I think it's probably the same way with a lot of arthropods, and most likely the same way with a lot of microbes. There's not a whole lot of research historically with soil microbes, but I think as we learn more about what's going on, we'll find that it's really important. And so we try to have a habitat here at Texas Discovery Gardens so that we can have all of those butterflies and critters and plants to be a good part of the whole food web. And to feed birds, if you're watching birds right now, you know they're hunting for insects because they want protein. And as we learn from Doug Tallamy, which I'll show on the next slide, caterpillars are pretty picky about what they eat, and caterpillars are really important for the food web. So birds, whenever they're feeding their young, they really like squishy things that they can just stuff down the baby's throats. And so that's why we try to have the plants that caterpillars eat. So there's lots of caterpillars around, not only for butterflies later on, but to feed baby birds. And if you're interested in this, you can take a look at the research that the University of Delaware does and check out their native plant finder, which helps you decide on good plants that feed insects right in your own zip code. So our gardening philosophy, we try to move towards less irrigation, and we have a lot of tropical plants. We did. I think I put this slide together maybe the 1st of February. So some of our tropical plants may have just taken care of themselves, and we don't have to worry about irrigating them as much anymore. We also try to keep pesticides out. So I'll show on the next slide that the predators usually show up if we just give them a little bit of time. The exception to that, of course, is fire ants. We are trying to use resilient plants, so we know weather is going to be unpredictable, and not only heat tolerant but cold tolerant plants. And ecological heavyweights. So if you haven't heard of the term productivity or in the ecological terms, that's plants that feed a lot of insects. And so I'm trying to think about that as I plan what we plant in some of our areas. And then we leave winter homes for arthropods. Try not to trim down too much, try not to take away too much in the fall. Runs the risk, of course, of looking kind of messy, but then we leave those little homes for the critters over the winter. So I'll show you right here. We have lots of aphids that are feeding on this plant, but of course, here come the lady beetles. So they're gonna eat them, they're gonna lay eggs, and then their larvae are gonna munch on those aphids. This is a standing stalk of probably a silphium that we just trimmed, but we left there. And as I was taking these photos, I could see little webs and little lady beetles overwintering inside. So it's really great habitat for them. And then this is an image showing that some bees live inside these hollow stems too. So this is our Johnson garden. It's one of the oldest gardens, and it's really peaceful and really beautiful, but it does have a lot of exotic plants. So some of these plants are from other continents. And as they die out, or as we can kind of work others in, we'll try to put in some native plants. I know that Addison was able to plant some of our Passiflora lutea, so that's great for fritillaries. And if you look closely in this garden now, you'll see some of those Passifloras that have done just fine over the winter, and they're growing like crazy. And then in some areas, we just won't fill them in. So we had Indian hawthorn over here on the edge and just cut them back, and it looks just fine. There's really not a gap there without them. So we can just leave those and not replace them. So moving on to some of our drought resistant gardens. Benny Simpson is our oldest native plant garden. It's not irrigated. And then Butterfly Habitat was irrigated at first, but it no longer is. And then Conservation Canyon is not irrigated as well. And but it's in a storm drain. So it does get stormwater going through it quite a bit. So Benny Simpson plant collection, some of the plants that are in this area. A lot of oaks and a lot of other plants, about 126 species. So this is just 3 pages out of 5 pages of the plants that are in this area. And it's not only inside our fence, but it stretches outside of our fence as well. And these are plants that Benny Simpson might have collected, or in the case of the original area, they're trees from his own personal collection. And he was very active in the 80s and 90s. And for those of you who are around and remember the drought years of the 1980s, it was hot and it was dry. And it was really good that he was bringing some of these plants in from West Texas that could stand those long, hot summers. In this original garden, there were a lot of trees. And so this tree canopy has closed in the past 25 years. And so I'm trying to get it kind of rethought and replanted a little bit for the 25th anniversary of the installation of this garden. So this was the original drawing. The trees are drawn on this drawing at maybe about 1/5 of their mature size. So instead of just being little tiny circles, they should be big giant circles, because all of this is in complete shade now. We have big tooth maple, desert willow, Texas persimmon, and kidney woods that have survived just fine. The drooping juniper has survived just fine, and most of these oaks are doing well and have closed that canopy. And here's a couple of images from them. Big tooth maple has beautiful fall color. Desert willow, of course, has big, beautiful orchid-like blooms. And Texas persimmon, if you have a fruit-producing tree, you could have either a pollen-producing tree or a fruit-producing tree. They're dioecious. And you could possibly get these little edible persimmons from that. Excuse me. I'm going to have to grab a little bit of water. My windows are closed, but yeah, allergies. All right, and then in another part of the garden that's within the parking lot, we have hawthorns that are blooming this time of year, and also prairie crabapple. Beautiful trees, and they're really tough to find. So I'm really glad that we have these here on our grounds. We also have chili pequins, which if you have some, you probably have a lot. And these plants were so great in February because we had just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of robins flock through and just strip all of the peppers off. And so it was great to have the food for those hungry birds. Fairy duster is a really pretty plant, and snapdragon vine as well. These have all survived through the years. Artichoke of agave. Flaxleaf buchea is a pretty unusual, very tough to find plant. So we have just a couple of those planted out in this garden. And coral honeysuckle you can find just about anywhere. And it's a beautiful plant. It blooms almost year round. And right now, hummingbirds are coming through, so you really need a lot of honeysuckle flowers to feed them because they're hungry birds. And some of the more unusual plants that we have in Benny Simpson, the narrow leaf acanthus or honeysuckle, desert honeysuckle. We're all probably familiar with the red version of this plant, but this one has a little longer blooms and narrow leaves, and it's just really nice. It's very, very pretty. There's also the 7-leaf creeper, which I think this is what this is. It's planted in the spot it was supposed to be. But of course, you're probably familiar with the Virginia creeper that is really aggressive and you see almost everywhere. But this one is less aggressive as a plant, and it's endemic to Central Texas. So we're really lucky to have a specimen here on our grounds. And this is another Aniscanthus. It's a pink blooming one, and it grows really big. So one of its common names is dwarf desert honeysuckle, and that's not true because it gets really, really tall. But it's also a beautiful plant and is sometimes one of the first ones to bloom. Sometimes this will bloom even as early as January or February. And some of our newer plants. So for the shady areas, I kind of guessed it to what I thought Benny Simpson would like to have in this garden. So we got some Melica here that I purchased at the Wildflower Center at a plant sale not too long ago, last fall. And so it's putting out blooms and is doing really well. We had some seeds of this one flower, and hasn't bloomed yet, but I'm hoping that it will. Marble seed is something that you can find if you walk around in some of the nature trails around in our area, and it's blooming right now. This is the best time of year to see it. It's a really unusual plant with these curled blooms and these closed flowers, and bees will sometimes just punch holes in them and rob the nectar without pollinating the flower. We have Philadelphias. I don't have a photo of that one. And of course, cedar sage has beautiful red flowers. And I have some bamboo muley that we'll be putting into this garden in hopefully the next few weeks. And then as this garden has expanded back along the fence area, we have some other plants in there too. Spineless prickly pear, lots of Zixmania, of course, Texas persimmon again, kidney wood. For those of you that have kidney wood, we're finally starting to see leaves, so don't give up on yours just yet. It might still leaf out. It's taken a long time. And then the drooping junipers are doing just fine. Some of our uninvited guests in the Benny Simpson collection, frostweed. Frostweed is a great plant, but once you have one, you're going to have a lot. And so we'll be weeding a lot of this one out. We have a lot of palmetto that's coming in, a lot of beautyberry coming in. Of course, inland sea oats. See all those seeds? They are making new plants now. And of course, poison ivy. And a few others, false indigo bush, that's blooming right now and it's really beautiful. Desert willow and evergreen sumac will be blooming later in the year. It's not right now. It's a little bit tender, so it suffered some in February, but it came back just fine. And moving on to our next garden, their butterfly habitat. So our native butterfly habitat, and I'll show you a little close-up of some of these quotes in the next slides, but it's all of these little pathways right over here. If you're facing the fountain, it's over to the left. On the sign, it talks about pollinators and how important pollinators are to ecology. So if you remove those pollinators, the whole ecosystem collapses. And from the Cornell University entomologist, bugs are not going to inherit the earth. They own it now. So we might as well make peace with the landlord. And so the idea behind this garden is to have plants to support as many butterflies and moths and Lepidoptera as we possibly can. And so we have probably designed with about 350 different species. And this is Roger's list. You can see that it's written by hand and it's on the sides and the margins, and tough to interpret, but I've tried to put that into a spreadsheet so that we can have a little better grip on what's there. And then each one of these little plots has a mix of many, many different species. And so it takes a lot of time and a lot of very careful gardening to make sure we keep what we want and we get rid of what we don't want. It was started in 2014, and this tree right here is about 12 feet high now. So some of them really grow in quickly. And this is Milton and Roger putting in the drip irrigation. We don't need the drip irrigation there anymore, but it was great to get everything started. And then this is an aerial image showing what it looked like right after those planting beds were put in. This garden has everything that healthy butterflies and moths will need. We have a lot of trees. Trees are great host plants. A lot of them are great host plants, and butterflies and moths also need breaks from the wind. So we have windbreaks here. We have food for caterpillars, of course. And then we have some damp sand and mud for puddling. Adult butterflies often need those dissolved minerals. And rotting fruit. This is not a rotting, this is a very tasty Eastern persimmon that I was eating at the time, but we leave some of the rotting fruit there for butterflies to feed. And we'll go through some of those areas. This is Fritillary Freeway, so Passiflora, passion vine. Here's some of the caterpillars and then adults emerging. Sulfur Street, sulfur caterpillars, and lots of senna in that area. Leafwing, these are some of my favorites. These seeds are really hard to gather because they just burst apart as soon as the seed pods are ripe, but we will have quite a few come back. And then we have the Texobama, which is a perennial. And these are some of my favorites because they look like leaves when they're closed. And buckeyes feed on a lot of different things, so that's easier to have larval food for those caterpillars. Snake herb, penstemon. Toadflax is blooming right now. That's a little annual that you would see if you don't pull up your weeds or in some wild places in parks or on the trails. Verbena, and this little guy is it's a plantain, common name plantain. The botanical name is Plantago. It's also a weed, so that's one of the challenges that comes in with trying to let everybody know what's weed and what's not, because it certainly looks like a weed, and in other areas we would pull it up, but in the areas where we want buckeye caterpillars, we need to leave it. And of course, admirals feed on nettles, cherries, and oaks. So if you have oak trees, you are potentially supporting about 400 different caterpillar species. So oaks are one of those heavy hitters when it comes to ecological species. And giant swallowtails. If you haven't seen a giant swallowtail caterpillar, you might mistake it for bird poop because that's their camouflage. They hang out on top of the leaves, they don't move, they're kind of shiny and they look wet, and so they aren't bothered because who's going to bother bird poop? And then they emerge into a giant swallowtail caterpillar. And we also have a lot of Texas parsley, so that's a biennial, and it'll reseed this year. And we'll have a lot more Texas parsley, and that's food for our black swallowtails. And of course, monarchs. Monarchs are so much fun to watch, and the fall migration, whenever they're going south for the winter, they're looking for a lot of nectar. So we have a whole area devoted to just frostweed, because frostweed blooms just in time to provide nectar for those butterflies that are going south. And this is a great place to watch monarchs. You can see this one has a tag. We do some tagging here on site, and then sometimes they hang out. I talked to John Watts, our entomologist, and said, "Oh, I saw a butterfly with a tag, and it was here. Where did it come from?" He said, "Oh yeah, well, we probably just tagged it here, and it has a good food source, so it's just trying to fatten up a little bit before it flies on." And I took this photo just a couple of days ago. Addison's been working hard on her plot. to get some milkweed in there, and you can see that a monarch female did find it and laid eggs on the milkweed, and then those are, I don't know what instar, not an entomologist, but they're getting pretty fat and happy, and so they have a lot of food to eat, and hopefully they'll emerge as adult monarchs in just a few weeks. And then finally, Conservation Canyon. This is our latest garden. It's located where Ranger Drive used to be. Ranger Drive reached, just kind of arced all the way through the original gardens and down here to the road and connected through. So most of this had been pulled up as the different gardens were planted, and this was the last piece remaining. You can see that's this is the arch to the midway for the state fair back behind, and then we've torn out the asphalt and planted plants. So the idea behind this is to try and get some blackland prairie plants in there. Blackland prairie is just critically endangered. There's hardly any left, just a fraction of a percentage of blackland prairie is left in Texas, but we have plenty of asphalt. So with all of our asphalt, of course, we have not only replacement of vegetation, which helps slow down raindrops, but it's also creates runoff. So I think I looked and saw that you had a stormwater presentation for the last Earth Day Everyday presentation. So this ties right into that stormwater management. You can see here in Fair Park, lots and lots and lots of concrete, and the Trinity River watershed, there's a lot of trees, and so the rain is slowed down as it's falling from the sky and doesn't contribute so much to erosion when it hits soil or runoff if it were to hit impervious surface. And then here's a residential neighborhood that kind of has some nice tree cover, but then of course also has a lot of runoff coming from all of that impervious surface. So you can see this was the original impervious surface here. We still have some storm drains, which we had to keep. We can't mess with the storm drains and the stormwater. And it's a little bit too much rain for us to keep on site. So this was what we did, and Dallas and other cities use this idea of a bioswale. So it's trying to slow down, cool the water, give you some vegetation diversity as a way to manage that stormwater runoff. And our particular area, we have close to an acre of impervious surface that drains through those two storm drains. So all of this parking lot and all of the road outside that gate drains through here. If we were to have a 1-inch rain and keep all of that water, it would be enough to fill a good sized swimming pool, and there's just not enough room. So we have to let some of that extra water go down the storm drain, but I guarantee we're reducing quite a bit of it. This is one of the early drawings that I made for some of our plantings going in this area. And then these are some construction photos. As the asphalt was removed, the soil underneath has been covered maybe for 80 years, and so it hasn't had contact with air or with water, probably not any microbes to speak of in there, and so it's going to take it a long time to really recover and be some good soil full of life. But we did get a good start. This was whenever it was first finished. We have the pathway marked out in sand, and I would have liked a little less mulch in some areas. This is over a foot, and that's really too much. For one thing, because we have a lot of Bermuda coming through. So this was early days in the Bermuda comeback. And then we're trying to at least draw a line there through that mulch to keep it on one side if we can. And at this point, with our lack of staff, we've sort of lost that battle. So we've got a lot of Bermuda that's crept in there. We put lots and lots of different species in there. And with that much mulch, this is an example kind of what not to do. So almost all of those died. Here's a healthy bluebonnet that's in another area of the garden, and these are the sickly bluebonnets because there's just not good, healthy soil. So we finally were seeing some sunflowers that were taking hold in June of 2020. And then this is what it looks like as of yesterday or the day before, April 2021. We have a lot of grasses left over and not quite as many flowers this spring as we had last spring. So we may do a little bit more reseeding in there, but we have really a lot of them that are just about to bud. So I think that they were just slowed down by our cold weather in February. And then this area right here is a technique to kill off some of this Bermuda on the slope called solarization. So we've got it covered with black plastic. It'll heat up through the summer, and then hopefully in the fall, we won't have as much Bermuda and we'll be able to plant some different species on there. This is what it looked like after one of the first rains, after it was finished. The plants aren't really there yet, but you can see quite a bit of water coming through. And then all of the big 4 prairie grasses are included in the area: switchgrass, big bluestem, little bluestem, and Indian grass. And then lots of other interesting grasses: Cytodes grama, our state grass of Texas, eastern gamma grass, which has these really beautiful flowers. Texas bluegrass, Texas cupgrass did really well, and bushy bluestem is a great plant to have in this environment because it can take being dried out, but it also does really well in damp soil. So some close-ups on the eastern gamma grass, the anthers, pollen, immature flower, and then the stigmas reaching out there to collect the pollen from the air, and these are the immature seeds right here. And hackberry, I always give a little plug to hackberry because hackberries are often some of the first trees that are taken out with new construction. But hackberries are really an ecosystem in and of themselves. All kinds of galls by different insects. These are kind of silhouetted, they're kind of spiky galls. These are round galls. These are flat galls. All kinds of critters do well with hackberries or sugarberries. I've been corrected. So this is the sign that I hope to get printed to put up here on Conservation Canyon and talk about converting that gray asphalt into green plants. So it talks a little bit about what the bioswale is about, and don't you think that prairie looks nicer than parking lot? And then finally, I think we have maybe 12 minutes or so left. Talk about some of our challenges and successes here at Texas Discovery Gardens. I've been really lucky and happy that we've done so well, but here's an example of where it's just beyond our control, right? So this photograph was taken, I think, September, August, something like that, last year. And then this is what it looks like yesterday. So there's a number of different reasons. The lantana is coming back, and so we'll probably have those blooms. I don't think that the Esperanza is going to come back at all, so that'll have to be replaced. And then in this particular area, we had a guy come by on his bicycle and decide that since these plants were outside the fence, that they were free for the taking. And so he took quite a few of them and just stole them. And the plants that he took and the labor to replace them is over $1,500. So that's a felony. So I'm hoping we don't see him back anytime soon. Well, at least not to take our plants. He's welcome to visit the gardens. And then these are some areas that we've been working on really, really hard to get some native plants in there. And it's been really interesting to see what's come back. You know, we have exotic plants from all over the region, all over Texas, and all over the world. And the ones that really didn't mind our freezing cold weather in February were the ones that were native to this area. So that's something to consider whenever you're looking at replacing plants in your own landscape. We have a little garden called Secret Garden. We've got a lot of Blackfoot daisies and four-nerve daisies and prairie verbena planted in there. They're doing really well, so I'm pretty happy about that. Our VIP suite, we have a little garden in there. That's not as much of a success story. The plants did well, and they're coming back very nicely, but I didn't think that we would have as much foot traffic through that garden as we've ended up having. And so I did move some of them and put them in a different area, and then just put soft grasses right there that can take being stomped on whenever people are in a hurry to get back and forth there during the weddings. And the Herkimer Overlook, that's doing really well. The coralberry is just doing extremely well, and that's a wonderful plant, not only for the berries through the winter, but it's also a great host plant. And I have some of those details a little further on. American basket flower is another plant that I didn't put in that last slide, but it's beautiful. It's an annual, and it mixes in really well with other plants. So if that's one, you can buy seeds for that. It's tough to sell it commercially because some of the annuals just don't do well in pots, but it's great to buy seeds for that. And wine cups are great host food for caterpillars, four-nerve daisies, and of course we talked about the crotons for the goat wings. Then this is where things got a little stomped. The coralberry is doing well. The Tradescantia is doing well. The Manfreda was a little bit trampled on, but the ironweed has come back nicely. And coralberry is host to a lot of different caterpillars. So snowberry clearwing, hummingbird clearwing, Cecropia silk moth, owl moth, and white-marked tussock moth. Here's some more. We've got almost all of these plants planted. We've got just a few more to go. And this is a Cecropia silk moth. So that coralberry right here is a plant that these caterpillars eat, and this is a male that's recently emerged and ready to go on. They're really beautiful and really giant moths. This is my sister. She gave the eggs to us. She's not a large person, but that's a really big critter. And then some of our other challenges, because we have so many species and everything mixed all together, sometimes it's really hard to tell what's a weed and what's not. So more than once, our gardeners or volunteers will accidentally pull something up that I kind of hoped would stay there. And then this is a cow itch vine. It was overgrown on the fence on the gate, and probably about time for it to be cut back, but then there's a caterpillar, a huge caterpillar that's feeding on it. So maybe best to just leave everything until December and not cut anything back early. And of course, we're in Fair Park. So when State Fair of Texas is around, they come through and herbicide some of the plants in the cracks. And then unfortunately, where they herbicided here was in the drainage straight to Conservation Canyon. So that's sometimes a little bit challenging. And then of course, our latest hailstorm. I did not get hail at home where I live, but then I came to work the next morning and wow, we got a lot of hail. So I think this was March 23rd, just drifts of ice the next morning. Our shade cloth in our plant sales area is just completely collapsed from all of the ice. And the agaves made it through the February freeze just fine, only to get really scarred from the hailstorm. This is one side of the spineless prickly pear that was protected. This is the other side that was in the line of fire. So it's got a lot of scars on it from the hailstones. And of course, access to our gardens from the gate at Fair Park has been tough during the inoculations, which is great. It's great that everybody's getting inoculated, but the lines of cars wrapping around our gardens and also Fair Park, for anybody that's been down here knows that sometimes that's a real challenge. And so we haven't had as many visitors as we hoped we would have right now. And it may be that sometimes they just give up and go somewhere else. So hopefully everybody will be vaccinated soon, and then we don't have to worry about long lines anymore. And I wanted to give you a few resources about Plants for Your Landscape. We already talked about Native Plant Finder. The Xerces Society has some nice resources. Pollinator.org. The Forest Service has a nice series of sites on pollinator plants. And of course, AgriLife here in Dallas has a lot of resources too. And if you're looking to buy some of these plants, be sure and check out the Native Plant Society. They have a list of plant sales this spring on their website. You have to search for it a little bit, but you can find it. And North Texas Master Naturalists, Dallas County Master Gardeners. And then we're hoping tentatively set a date for May 15th for another sale here. So I think that's about it. Want to wrap it up there. And I think we have time left for questions. Danielle, are you on?
Hi, yes, I'm here. So let's see. I think Vanessa was going to do the questions, but I did see some in the chat.
Okay.
So let me.
Oh, sorry, Vanessa.
Oh no, that's okay. Yeah. So we did have some questions. Is it possible to keep mulberry trees in Dallas?
Mulberry trees?
Yes. So someone has some from, or they were given from Northeast Texas, and they were wondering if they can grow them here in Dallas.
And we are pulling out mulberries like crazy. So it depends, of course, on what species they are, but I mean, they grow like weeds, so you shouldn't have any problem from East Texas trees.
Awesome. Mulberries are very tasty, but yes, you're correct. They are a little bit, they are a little bit weedy. And does Texas Discovery Gardens have a prospective open date for outdoor special events yet?
For outdoor special events, it would kind of depend on what the special events are. We've been having weddings and other events that are booked through we outsourced our events through Two Sisters, and that's going big time. So yeah, we've been open to the public again since June, and then our visitation has been going up steadily since then. So yeah, if that person is interested in and looking for an event, you could check our website for those contacts.
Perfect. Sorry, let me go here. And just a comment about how great it is to see the modifications that are happening at Fair Park to help slow down the stormwater.
Yeah.
Are you aware of any other improvements that are happening at Fair Park to slow runoff like y'all are doing?
What I focus on is just within our fences, and I know Fair Park is planning on putting in some new parks, but nobody's contacted me or contacted us about any help with the design and plant recommendations for that. But we're certainly open to helping if we can.
Hopefully they will, because it seems that y'all did a great job with that. And we also had a question about how well the soil microbiome tolerates the solarized areas where you're putting down, where you showed where you're putting down the black tar.
It'll probably die off. But would it still be there if we sprayed it with a bunch of herbicides? I don't know. It's just one technique, and we aren't doing all of that area, so the microbes that are outside will be able to come right back in, hopefully without too long. And of course, we'll be adding in some more plants, and so there'll be microbes on the roots of those plants that will help to repopulate whatever dies off.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've heard that question quite a few times. I know it's a concern. I know.
Right. Let's see. There's a comment about how permaculture has some interesting approaches to runoff, which I think is kind of the same technique that y'all are using there with the bioswales. I know is used a lot in permaculture.
Yeah, we have just one bioswale, just one.
Well, maybe some more in the future.
Yeah, I hope.
Does anybody else have any questions for Carrie? I'm interested if you've come up with any good techniques for removing Bermuda grass.
Persistence, and a couple of hours every day.
Let's see. How can people who are interested volunteer with or donate to the Texas Discovery Gardens?
Best way is to get in touch either by phone or by email. So I have our website down here, and I can go to our next slide, txdg.org. That's our website, and sometimes it takes a little time to go through those tabs, but you can find them. We have donations available there, memberships, and our volunteer sign up.
Perfect. And I know you mentioned the plant sale. I'm sorry, I didn't catch the date. You said another one is tentatively on May.
May 15th. So I'll go back to that
15th.
slide.
Oh, so there it is, May 15th. Perfect.
May 15th. Tentatively set, so we don't have a full decision on the exact days and the exact times, but you can watch our website for that, and it will most likely be members only.
Okay, so that's a benefit of becoming a member.
It is, yes. Join now, and then you get 10% off the plant sales.
Even better. And I'm sure we'll have you'll have some of those amazing plants that you showed in the presentation.
We're trying as much as we can. We've been slowed down, of course, because things have been really challenging. We'll have as much as we can possibly have for sale, and as many of the plants from our grounds. I mean, ideally, all of our plants would be propagated from our grounds. That's not really possible right now to still have more than 10 plants to sell. So we do as many as we can from the seeds and cuttings on our grounds.
Very neat. Do y'all sell the seeds as well, or just the plants?
Just the plants, yeah.
Okay. Let's see. I think that was all the questions in our chat, unless anyone has any else. I know my mouth started watering when you showed that persimmon.
Yeah.
So it's like my childhood growing up, but you have to get the persimmons, at least in East Texas, you have to beat all the critters to the persimmons because they find them tasty.
You have to beat the critters, and you have to make sure they're nice and soft and squishy.
Please do.
Yes.
Otherwise you're just
Yeah, they make your mouth pucker.
But I've never actually grown the Texas persimmon, so I think that might have to be my next project. That looks very intriguing.
Yeah, you can find those. We have Texas persimmons growing outside our fence. And so anybody that wants to come by and eat those, sometimes the critters get to them first. So you'll see half-eaten ones on the ground. And I've gathered up as many seeds of those as I can so that we can start those trees for ourselves here. And they're really pretty tasty. They kind of taste like a juicy prune.
Might have to definitely try those.
If you feel adventurous, yes.
And hopefully you'll have some to sell at a future plant sale.
Yeah, we were able to place some orders for Texas persimmon trees at our last tree sale, which was in October of last year. And yeah, those went really quickly. The Texas persimmon trees were popular. The thing about that is you really need to buy 2 or 3 because you could have a male tree that's not going to produce fruit. It's only going to produce pollen, or you could have a fruit producing tree. You will not know until it's old enough to produce those flowers.
Until it happens.
Yes.
So the mulberry question was actually mine.
Oh,
and
okay.
I was trying to keep it more shrub-like or more compact because in her yard it's huge. So I was wondering, can you keep it a smaller tree, or is that just really not doing it justice?
You can keep hacking it, or you can let it grow to its full size. But yeah, that's just more work for you. But sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
try
my
husband.
Yeah. All right.
Well, this,
Oh no, I was just gonna ask, just for the people who are watching, are all those plants that you shared with us, or most of those would be adaptable to people's yards? So if they want to
Yeah.
get those in their backyards, or
Yeah, some of them do get big, so you want to make sure you do a little research about the mature size. So I know that we were chatting before we started that the Oenothera, the evening primrose that gets really large is the biennial one. It gets giant, so that's not appropriate for all yards. Some gardens are pretty small or they're close to a sidewalk, so you need smaller plants. But we try to, in our big list that we publish of availability, we try to have those mature heights, or you could always ask a volunteer because some of them do get big, especially those native grasses. They're important to have, but you have to have space for them too. But we do have a lot of the smaller grasses that people may not think about as being part of the prairie as well.
perfect.
good deal. Well, Carrie, we appreciate your time. This was a fabulous presentation, as someone noted in the chat. Thank you for that comment, Jacqueline. So I'm glad to share that with Carrie. Carrie, is it possible for us to get and share a copy of your slide deck?
Absolutely,
If
I'd be
anyone
happy to
wants
send
it?
it to you.
Okay, thank you for being willing to do that.
Yeah.
So Vanessa, you want to close
Oh,
us
right.
out?
Sorry. Sure. Sorry. We had a fire drill this morning and it's put me off my game today. I apologize. Well, thank you, Carrie, so much for joining us. I'll
you
send
both.
a follow-up. I'll send up a follow-up email with the slides once Carrie shares those, and also with the recording. This will also be available on YouTube. So if you want to go back and watch a part, maybe you didn't catch a plant write down a plant name that you wanted. You can go back, or you can share it as well for other people you think might benefit from all the wonderful plant information that we have. So be sure to join Monday's fruit trees. If we're talking about fruit trees, someone from the Dallas Arborist will be there to talk about how to grow fruit trees, and then also the Earth Day Every Day next week that Danielle mentioned at the top of the program. And I put those links in the chat. So yes, thank you so much, Carrie, for joining us and sharing all the plants. I know I have a whole list now of things I think I need.
Yeah.
And I'll
Thank you
definitely have to
both.
come out. Everyone should go out and check out the Texas Discovery Gardens right now. It's probably the beautiful time to see them.
It is. And thanks again for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
And the weather is nice.
Yes.
Yes.
The weather's nice this week.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much.
Bye.